Welcome back. In this video, we are going to go over our conditional access within the Entra admin portal. This is continuing on in our series of 0 to 60 in Microsoft 365, where we get up to speed in administrating our Microsoft 365 environment. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Defensive insights within a compressed format. So we can see here we're in conditional access for Entra and for our Entra portal. And a little bit about conditional access in case you haven't heard this. I'm sure you have, but in case you haven't, conditional access is, like it says in the name, conditions that give you access. So if you come from a world of on-prem, you may be familiar with access control lists in a firewall or policies and firewall rules. So this is similar, however, it is applied against the identity. So instead of being applied against a flow of traffic or some other device level thing or network level thing, this is applied against the identity's sake. And because identity is becoming more and more sort of the main transport to access everything, this is super useful and super foolproof, if you will. Rather than going after an IP address or network, you can say, all right, I want these identities to have this access and they have to be compliant against this, and this to gain access. And when they do, you can also control around how they grant access. So grant access with MFA, grant access with the session only being this long before it changes. So it's very powerful. So we're going to get straight into it. We're going to look at the policies. We're going to look at how things work. When you jump in here in your tenant, if it's not set up previously, you'll probably see no policies here. If you have migrated to conditional access away from security defaults, you may see some Microsoft managed defaults being put in, which are really good. However, we're going to jump into a new policy that's custom just to show what the flow of creating a conditional access policy is. Everything that we create, we're going to put a little TV icon to represent this is YouTube. This is just a test and for demo's sake. So we get to name our policy, then we have to assign it. So we're obviously assigning against identity. So we can include and exclude. Do we want to include all users or select users and groups? And under that, we have choices against which users and groups. Do we want guest or external users? Directory roles. So if we click that, we get all of our different roles within Microsoft. Or do we want a user or group? So for this example, I'm just going to go all users. Then you can exclude against guest or external users, directory roles, or users and groups. Always good to exclude the user that you are using, or at least some global admin users, so that you have a break fix way of coming in if the policy breaks anything. Obviously, go and assess this and see as time passes whether or not you can remove that break fix account, because you want to be applied security to all accounts. But just know, always during the first setup, put in an exclude break fix account that has the relevant role to be able to remove a broken policy. Next is the target resources. So what are we targeting? Now, when we talk about target resources, again, we're in the identity world. So we're not talking about, necessarily an application on a computer unless that application uses Entra identity to authenticate to gain access. So here when it says all resources, which was formerly known as all cloud apps, technically speaking, you can think of cloud sort of environment generally, but probably a more holistic view would be anything that uses Entra to authenticate, uses single sign-on, is an application of that form. This is what all resources is referring to. You can also select resources, so you can have pinpointed ones. So you might have a security for, say, a financial authentication rather than all your resources. You might be more stricter on something like that. Again, we're going to choose all resources, and again, you can exclude here too. Network. So we'll go into this a little bit later when we talk about having a block against outside world, an inclusion or a grant access to the country that you are in, or what is normal or IP addresses, but this is the area for that. And then there are conditions. So conditions for granting access or blocking. So do we want it to be based on user risk, whether that user has a high, medium, low risk? Do we want it to be the sign-in risk, whether that is a high, medium, low, or no risk? Insider risk, device platform, locations, client apps, filter for devices, or authentication flows. So in this case, we're not going to set any. And next you have the access controls. So this is all the assignment, right? And then the conditions. And now after the fact, okay, these have all been triggered. What do we want to allow in our access? Do we want to block or grant? And that is the option here. We can block outright or we can grant. And if we grant, we can add on another tag here that can say, I want to grant, but it's going to require some multi-factor authentication or require authentication strength, where you can say it's not enough to require multi-factor. We actually need authentication strength of phishing resistant MFA. You could require the device to be marked as compliant, and on and on and on, as you can see here, like requiring a password change. And then you have this option down here for multiple controls. Do you want this to be an and or an or? So do you want to require all of the selected controls or require one of the selected controls? So for this one, we are going to say grant access and require multi-factor authentication. And then next is session. So again, we're talking about identity. So do we want to have the session controlled as well? Do we want to use app enforce restrictions, use conditional access app control, sign-in frequency? So say we want to re-authenticate every 2 hours. Well, that can be done here. Or every time that they go and reach out to this app, get them to re-authenticate. How long do we want a persistent browser session? Always persistent or never persistent? So we have all these controls around the session. We're not going to set any in this demo, but just know that they're there. By default, Microsoft has the policy set up to be created as a report-only policy. This is really good because in a big corporate environment, you don't want to be throwing out policies left, right, and center. You want to do it in a staged and staggered approach. So you design it and you have a scope for it. Then you push it as a report only and you let it sit dormant for an allotted time. And during that allotted time, you go and look at the logs within conditional access and you check against your control what's being triggered. And within that, you can actually see, okay, this is going to affect this, is going to affect this. And that allows you to then see the impact it's going to make when you turn it on. And then as you roll it out, you're informed before the fact. So think of it as like a soft rollout before you go and enforce it. But you can, out of choice, just jump straight to on or off. So we're going to go report only. And we're going to talk about that and where to find those logs. So once you have your policies set in place and you want to go and see those that are being reported on and whether or not that would be triggered before actually pushing it out and doing that soft rollout first, that is going to be under our monitoring side here on the left pane under sign-in logs. Once you're in the sign-in logs, you'll see your logs. Then you can click on the one that you believe is relevant, go to report only, and here you'll see your conditional access policies that have been set up in report only and whether or not they have been applied. So you can see in this one here that our two demos, so test demo that we just created and one that I created off camera, which was to require multi-factor authentication for admins, have not been applied. Now going back to our policies, we have one area that we didn't touch on so far, and that is our networks and locations. Now, the biggest place you're going to find use for networks and locations is around who you're allowing access into your resources, cloud apps, and identity authentication contexts. So think of this as, okay, in my case, I'm Australian. I'm not going to have someone from the US accessing my tenant and logging in, authenticating. So the place that we need to go to first is our named locations. Named locations, think of this as the place where you can create your whitelist IPs or blacklist IPs or your whole blocks of country. So you have this option here at the top to create a country location or IP ranges location. So you can see here that I've gone ahead and created two. There's one for Australia where I am and one for outside world. And you can see the conditional access policies that have been applied against these name locations. So if we just, for the sake of this video, say we want to create a new location, so we'll go country location and we're going to name it for YouTube. YouTube, and then we have an option here that we can determine location by IP address or location by GPS coordinates. And then Microsoft's gone ahead and allocated all of the different country blocks, and you can choose what you want to include or not include. So in an organization setting, you might have multiple sites, and they may be, say, you may have one that is in Belgium. You may have another that is in, let's say, Luxembourg, and you may have one in, say, Norway. So now that we've got our three sites of Norway, Luxembourg, and Belgium, we're going to go ahead, give this more of a contextual name. So we'll say these are our fake sites for business. So these are known locations that will be accessing our tenant in this scenario. If we refresh that, we can see there that we now have a name location and no conditional access policy configured. So if we go back to our policies, we're going to go and create a new policy. We're going to name it with our emoji for YouTube. And we're going to say we want to allow sites known to us. We're going to apply this to all users. We'll exclude our break/fix account. Target resources are going to be all resources. And we're going to jump over next to the conditions. We're going to click locations. We're going to configure yes. Select the location. We're going to choose our sites. We're going to grant that. And we're going to just require MFA as a minimum, as the other conditional access policies are going to pick up with enforcing the strength. And we're going to leave it on report only. Now you might think ahead already and you might go, okay, we've created this policy that's saying if you're coming from this country name location from one of our known sites, we're going to grant you access and we're just going to require MFA. But we're not really going to worry about the strength because another policy will pick it up. But what about the ones that are outside of that? That's a great question. So we've just gone ahead and created a whitelist. Now we need to create our blacklist. First by creating a new named location. And this is going to be the inverse to what we created a moment ago. So what I'm going to do is actually just copy that name, click add country location. We're going to name it the same except with block all except to denote that this is blocking all accepted. The sites that we had on our whitelist, we're going to include all, and then we're going to exclude the ones in which we were allowing, which were Belgium, Luxembourg, and Norway. So this is the countries in which we are blocking. It is the inverse of our last named location. And we're going to go ahead and create that. After creating that named location, we're going to go to our policies. We're going to go new policy. We're going to name it something that is contextual. In this case, YouTube block the outside world. Want to apply it to all users, excluding our breakfix account. We want to apply it to all target resources. And we want the conditions to have the location of our block list. Select that one. And under grant, we are blocking. Select, and we're leaving it on report only. Now, another way in which you may do this is actually have a named location that includes everything and then have an exclusion for your whitelist. So that's just one other way of doing this. Similar to firewall rules, there's always a million ways to do the same thing, but this is the way that I have seen used in the past by others, and I think it makes the most sense. So now we have two conditional access policies. One is a whitelist saying anything that comes from these sites, these known good countries for our business, good, allow it, but just have MFA enforced. Anything that comes from outside that, in this case also excluding the sites that we know, we'll block that. Just block it straight away. So now we have blocked out the outside world, allowed our sites, and we've also had a look at just doing a demo conditional access policy. But what about everything else? How do I know what I need to be doing within this? How do I know what policies to create? It's a good question, and Microsoft's provided an answer for this, and that's in templates. So at the top here, you have new policy from template. Click on that, and Microsoft has this beautiful area where you have all different categories of predefined templates for conditional access. Under Secure Foundation, they have ones for requiring multi-factor authentication for admins, securing security info registration, blocking legacy authentication, requiring MFA for all users, requiring MFA for Azure management, and on and on and on. Now, the ones that I would say need to be focused on is blocking around locations using named locations, then enforcing your MFA, enforcing phish-resistant MFA for admins, and then also creating conditional access policies around the admin portals to only allow your system admins to gain access to those resources. Beyond that, you can also think about, do I want to have all devices Intune enrolled and compliant? Then you can have a compliance policy for those devices that they will not be allowed to gain access to all resources or some resources unless they are joined and compliant. And lastly, the one in which Microsoft recommends, and you can see here in my tenant that it actually is already applied, is around user risk and sign-in risk. So you can see here, require MFA authentication for risky sign-ins and require password change for high-risk users. So when you have a P2 license or you have your E5 security, you have this option to have risky users and risky sign-ins, and it has a look at normal behavior against your identities and against your sign-ins. And if anything happens that is outside of the norm, it sets a risk level. And then within conditional access, you can actually have a condition based on that. So if we click into our risky sign-ins, we can see under our conditions, sign-in risk applied to high or medium. And it grants it, but it requires multi-factor authentication and it requires the session every time. If we go back one more step, we go to our high-risk users. This is going to be the same, except user risk high, granting it, requiring a password change, and the session sign in for every time. So it's really not that scary. It's not that hard. And once you do a few and you use the templates, you start to get a flow for what is conditional access. And you see that it is more far reaching than your traditional access control lists and your firewall rules, because it's identity context driven. And identities are becoming the one thing that is transient, the one thing that is common amongst all platforms. And so if we can have a policy against an identity that's following the identity through all of the application stack, that's going to be a whole lot more robust, a whole lot more secure than our traditional means. I hope that this video has explained what conditional access is, some practical ways to employ conditional access, and I hope that you've gotten something out of this. Please leave a comment and let me know what you'd like to go into further, any thoughts and opinions on this video, but more than anything, let me know if you got something out of this. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.